Okay, welcome again to Theories of Reality. I'm Professor Bardale, and we're going to continue talking about free will today. And I think let me call it the middle course here. Okay. Yeah. Show you where we're going here. It's week 6, by the way. Registration is ongoing. I registered for the classes I'm taking. Taking fencing this term, a little tender right here. That's where they hit you with the points. The girls, they all have these breastplate protectors. The guys, they don't get that. They just have to get jabbed. Neither is a point on there. It's a fun class, by the way. If you want to get in shape and do something in a feat like fencing, it's kind of fun. Okay, let's see. JB 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we go. There's a reality. So we're in week 6 already. If you're interested in contemporary moral issues, there are 20 spots for that. There's also an honor section. It's kind of a nice little feather in your cap. It looks good in your transcript if you take an honors course. The only extra thing you have to do in there is do a paper and a brief presentation in class, about 15 minutes, and then there'll be a question and answer thing on some topic that interests you. So that's next term, same deal as this class. More discussion focused, and we have the student presentations, I think, are the last week and a half. Sometimes they're squeezed into a week depending on how many honor students we have. So there's an honor section with 10 students, 10 seats there. So you can sign up for that. Even if you're not in the honors program, you can still take an honors course. And then there's 20 just regular classroom student sections. And then there's a video section if you want to watch stuff later on, although you won't be able to jump in and argue with somebody who's, saying something really, really wrong. And it'll be on the tail end of primary season, so it should be some interesting discussion. It's interesting how things are turning out. My prediction of a Trump juggernaut and a Sanders surge both turn out to be correct, and we might be looking at Sanders versus Trump in the general election, with third-party candidates pulling their usual 1%, if that. Okay, so this week, free will. Next work, free will, and next week, free will in the existence of God. So the exam is slated to open week 7 on Tuesday, February 16th. And again, you'll have a complete week to take it. Same drill as the last exam. If you want to come by for help reviewing, feel free to do so. Make an appointment, come by office hours, etc., etc. And there's a practice exam with 5 sample questions, and it'll cover, so this second exam will cover everything from life after death, starting with the Cranix in chapter 4, and chapter 5, all the stuff about free will. And there's a lot on life after death and free will, so that's all the second midterm exam. Okay. Any questions about that? Yeah. Chapters 4 and 5, right. And it'll open on Tuesday. So when we split like in the middle of the week, we'll finish free will and we'll do some review, and then on Thursday we'll start in with the argument for God's existence, and that and the meaning of life stuff's going to be what the final's about. Okay, last time we were talking about this argument from determinism in physics. Whoa, somebody's using green. What a terrible choice. Black. And you think about this, we live in a material world, so you get, again, how do people make decisions? Well, it's psychology. What is psychology based on? You know, it's your brain, right? Biology. Neurophysiology. Biology is reduced to chemistry. Chemistry is reduced to physics. And there are physical laws that govern all this stuff. So when you're making a decision, your brain is operating according to the laws of cause and effect. You have a perception. You make an assessment about what's happening. You have certain feelings. Hormones are coming into play. Whether you see attractive member of the opposite sex, or whether somebody's threatening you with a gun, there's a response there, right? Or maybe somebody makes some scurrilous comment about the peccadillos of your favorite political candidate, right? So all those things create reactions based on what you think someone says, what you think it means, and what's really going on. Well, something's going on in your brain, and that's it's electrochemical energy operating in there. It's just a biological machine. It operates according to the laws of cause and effect in the same way that a spaceship does, or a jet airplane. It's the reason that spaceships and jet airplanes and computers and all that stuff work most of the time is because the laws of cause and effect don't have any exceptions. And usually, if something's not working, you can troubleshoot it and figure out, okay, well, here's something that went wrong because this machine is slightly different than this other one that's working perfectly. So different antecedent conditions, different result, right? So why isn't this car starting, right? Well, it's because a tire that fell out on the middle of the freeway ruptured the battery, and all the battery acid is leaked out. This happened to me on my recent trip, right? So and you have another car whose battery acid is still in the battery, and it works just fine. So the same thing, if you get a person, and you have a sort of normal, functional human being, and he's got, nurturing parents that love him, and he grows up with having his basic needs met, and he has positive role models. He's probably going to turn out to be okay. But you get some other person who's from a broken home, early divorce, substance abuse in the house, poor role models. He's going to turn out to be a delinquent. Now, sometimes a person who comes from a disadvantaged background turns out to be okay and sort of surprises everyone. But do you think that's free will, or what might the determinists say about that? I was given this example, right, of the two people here, two kids growing up, right? Actually, I used the gunpowder case, didn't I, serve you? So you have this kid, right, and he's got, no father, not like, not like the daughter of God or something, like no human father, but doesn't know who his father is. Just suppose it's a boy, and boys tend to be predisposed more to delinquent behavior, and not having a male role model seems to be a particular problem. No father. Mom is a crack addicted prostitute. Poverty.
It's just not winning anymore.
No. I forgot what else we said was bad about him. Oh, abuse. I'll just put abuse. I won't specify. Maybe let's give him like a speech impediment that makes he has like a lisp or a cleft palate or something, so people make fun of him. Speech. And maybe he's got like a learning disability. Maybe it's related to fetal alcohol syndrome. Right, fetal alcohol syndrome. That's when your parents drink so much that you're born a drunk. I mean, you're born with an undeveloped brain because that alcohol was coursing through your mother's body while you were in the womb. Alcohol syndrome. This darn board. And the kid grows up to be president, right? Not likely, right? It's not likely he's even going to, make it through high school without ending up with trouble with the law, being a delinquent of some sort. So, and the determinists will say, it's no more possible for this guy to have to turn out okay than it is for you to light some gunpowder and fire and have nothing happen. It's the laws of cause and effect. Now, if you get different antecedent conditions, you might get a different result. So suppose you have, positive male role model. Right. So if you have that, you're gonna get a different result, right? So maybe there is a friend of the family that takes an interest in him. Maybe he's part of like a foster, or what do you call it, big brothers, big sisters thing, right? So he's got a big brother. Maybe he goes out and starts working out at the gym, and some a guy at the gym takes an interest in him and teaches him how to box or what have you, or weightlifting, or maybe he ends up just through happenstance, one of his friends works out at a martial arts studio, and he learns respect for himself and others, and how to defend himself, and ends up overcoming all this. But in the absence of some sort of positive influence, all these factors are going to determine what happens to him in life. And this is probably, maybe this gets into the behaviorist model a little bit, because I'm talking about, these are environmental things. But I think the argument from determinism in physics says, his brain is just working according to the laws of physics. And it's not like the laws of physics have exceptions. Things always turn out the way the antecedent conditions, all the conditions before the effect are. So same conditions, same effect. So what about this argument? What do you think? Does he have a free choice to not become a delinquent? Any thoughts on this? Oh, let's take another example, right? So you take like somebody, like you have a drug dealer, and he gets a dog from a shelter. And because he's sampling his own product, he's sort of erratic. And he punishes the dog for no particular reason, and rewards the dog when he's sort of in the mood. And the dog has no way of hooking up its behavior with whether it gets rewarded and punished. So the dog is sort of randomly punished and randomly rewarded. And the dog is like also trained to attack, because this guy does this, so he like trains in the backyard with, wraps a bunch of cloth around his arm, and trains the dog to attack, to bark, to be territorial. He leaves it chained up for long periods of time outside, exposed to the elements, yada yada, right? So how's this dog going to grow up? Well, it's going to be vicious, neurotic, unpredictable, likely to bite people for no reason. That's just the way. That's the way it's. The laws of psychology say that when an animal, and a human being is an animal, when an animal has no way of understanding how to avoid pain and get pleasure, it ends up being neurotic, erratic, It becomes frustrated and then lashes out in aggressive or violent behavior. And the same thing with a human being. A human being's a little smarter than a dog, and that in some ways makes it worse for the human being, because the human being can understand lots of things but can't figure out, particularly when they're really young, why am I being punished? Why am I angry all the time? So, so the idea, the sort of Pollyanna idea that everyone has this ability to make a free will choice, to overcome their obstacles and be a productive, happy human being, the determinists would say is just an illusion. Yeah.
So with this kid, there is nothing or no one for him to look up to, and it's very rare for him to like grow up to become maybe like good citizen or like a good person in society. It is possible though. It's actually possible, but like chances are very rare and slim.
Yeah, so maybe the deck's stacked against him. Now, like, why might he turn out to be productive? Well, role models don't even necessarily have to be like a person that's in your life. It could be like maybe a sports star on TV, or maybe it's like Star Trek. I've heard like inspirational stories of people, like they learn about like, self-respect and values and stuff from watching TV, from whether it's Star Trek or the Brady Bunch or whatever it is. So there's cultural messages in there too, maybe from school, maybe from a teacher, right? So it's hard with human beings. It's really hard to figure out what's causing what. So. But the determinists would say, look, if you have a person that has all these negative influences and they turn out okay, there's going to be something different with this person than there is with the guy that didn't turn out okay. And it's not like, so you have a person, suppose you have somebody who's just been arrested, right? And they've been arrested for shooting up Coke and robbing the 7-Eleven store, right? And you take them in and question them, and you look at their background. And how likely do you think it would be that they have two loving, modestly well-off parents, that they've had no behavior problems in the past, that they are a straight A student, that they have lots of friends, and no psychological issues? Like zero. You look at people in prison, they've always got lots and lots of problems. And almost all of them had tough childhoods where there was abuse in the home, there's substance abuse, there's poor role models, no father, or the father's abusive, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Well, I actually go to the prison a lot to play soccer with the inmates over there.
Mhm.
And actually, there's a guy that I spoke with, and that was the first crime he ever committed. That was like the taste of alcohol, and like
Uh-huh.
he smoked, and it just took him to another level, and he killed someone. Like that was his first crime.
Uh-huh.
He has a really good background and everything. So it's actually possible that like we could find a child whose parents are good and everything, but like just because of the influence of friends or like the influence of some kind of intoxication.
Yeah, but peer pressure and alcohol is, But then the question is like, why did he? I suppose lots of people get drunk, but lots of people get drunk and don't kill anybody. So the question is, like, sometimes people get so drunk they die from alcohol poisoning, but they don't kill anybody. So the question is, what's different with him that he did kill someone?
Friends.
Right? What's that?
Friends.
Friends, yeah. So maybe he's more susceptible to peer pressure. Now, does he have control over that, though, is the question. Maybe he does like a naturally docile personality. Maybe he looked at maybe his father was like kind of weak and absent. Maybe his mother was domineering. I don't know. So the behaviorist and also the determinist in general is going to say there's going to be something different about him that made him kill, that's different from the other person that got drunk and got subjected to peer pressure and didn't kill anybody. So I don't want to pry too much on the example. Was he just like sort of in a fight and it was like manslaughter, or is it premeditated murder?
Pretty much his own friend. They got drunk and they were high, like on a really high story.
Oh, and they got in a fight and he pushed them over or something?
Yeah.
So they're,
That's by accident.
manslaughter, so maybe that's, maybe that's just sort of, there's this thing called moral luck. Sometimes these things happen, right? Maybe if they weren't in a position where somebody might fall, they just get in a drunken fight and sleep it off. Sometimes you just be unlucky, like, be on the freeway when a truck tire falls out of the back of a pickup and have it hit you, right? You're just in the wrong place, the wrong time. Yeah.
So, what about I guess exceptions? I'm pretty sure Ted Bundy was a bar accredited lawyer, and he worked with, I think on Richard Dale, one of these political machine guys,
Right, yeah.
campaigns, and he spoke very highly of him. And he went on to kill God knows how many people. So, I don't know, how does that fit into this?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Ted Bundy. Oops. I'll withhold the jokes about bludgeoning college students to death in their sleep. and how maybe Ted wasn't such a bad guy. He probably he had a lot of frustrations to work out or something. But so he was from a privileged background, right? Privileged background. Does anybody know any particulars of the Bundy case? I know a little bit. So occasionally make jokes about my white panel van and fake cast. I'm going out for a bit in the van. I'll be back in a little while. He would have this thing where he'd have these crutches and a fake cast, and he'd be pretending to be struggling to get into his van. And then someone would come up and try to help him, and then he'd get the chloroform. And, I think that here you might say maybe there's just something wrong with his brain, that he's is sort of maybe this is a guy who's just sort of abnormal. Abnormal brain. I don't remember. You look at these guys, there's a kind of a profile for the serial killers. Usually they've tortured small animals when they're young, and they show this streak of sadism, and they show a lack of empathy. And about 1% of the population seem to be psychopaths. It's that some of them become, tobacco executives, some become politicians, some become lawyers, and some become serial killers.
What's
Yeah.
the difference?
I was just going to say that also
Okay, really.
coming from a privileged background and working in politics is really stressful, and you have a lot of people look at you in a way you have to meet these things and stand up to these standards, so that could also make someone go crazy, I feel like.
So, but I think that the idea, do you wake up one day, this is, okay, here's the libertarian position. I'm going to pretend I'm a determinist, and I'm going to talk about what a libertarian would say about Ted Bundy. One day, Ted Bundy was laying in bed and woke up in the morning, and it was a bright spring morning, and he got out of bed and he said to himself, you know what, I think I'm going to make a free will choice today, become a serial killer. And I'm going to put away all my human feelings of empathy and my guilt over harming others and all those things of morality. I'm going to put it all aside, and I'm going to go out and kill women for fun. And it's not realistic, right? I think that it started out, he actually did this interview with James Dobson from Focus on the Family. It's the conservative evangelical group. And basically he blamed sadomasochistic porn for his start. He sort of started watching this stuff on I think this is even pre-internet too. And he'd look at, bondage and S&M magazines, and he get this idea of doing bad things to helpless women. And then the first time he did it, he said he felt sick. He actually vomited, and and felt horrible. But also there was a certain thrill to it. And so instead of, not doing it again, he like ended up doing it again and again and again and again. And the more he did it, the easier it became. And then at a certain point, he became so habituated to it, became addicted to it. It was like a drug to him to kill. It's like a lot of other addictions, like smoking cigarettes, right? Who takes the first drag of the cigarette and goes, oh, that's great, right? Most people cough and sputter. Sometimes people throw up. But if you keep on doing it, then then you get habituated to it. So you might say he's got an abnormal brain. Maybe they're influence of sadistic porn, and maybe the combination of the two, right? So maybe most people, they look at like sadistic porn on the internet and they don't turn into serial killers, right? But maybe it's his abnormal brain, his lack of human empathy, and the sort of model of that made it look enticing to kill women was sort of together explosive combination. Other thoughts on I don't know, what makes like do people that do bad things, do they like serial killers or murderers, do they wake up one day and say, I make a real choice, become a career criminal, a robber, or whatever? It seems like that's like usually what happens is people get screwed up, they have lots of problems, there's something wrong with their brain, and they go wacko and kill somebody. Yeah.
So like our legal system defines it as two different things. So like McNaughton rule, which is adopted in a lot of states, states that if the person doesn't know what they're doing,
Yeah.
then they can get they
Right.
can't use the insanity case. Whereas reasonable denial or something, I forgot what it was. It states that if you wake up one day, it's like the bad hair day kind of rule. Like if you wake up one day and you're like, oh, kind of want to go kill some people,
Uh-huh.
and then you go out and kill some people, that could still, if you wake up and you could prove that insanity ensued that day, you could actually get off with insanity. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, there's a famous case of Leopold and Loeb in the 30s, I believe. Loeb, I think it's spelled. And it was William Jennings Bryant that defended them. And basically he said, you have these two privileged college kids, and college-aged young adults, going to an elite school. And they did this thrill kill where they abducted this 12-year-old boy and killed him just to see what it would feel like. And so they were finally caught, and they got this fancy attorney. It's like somebody else. Now I'm blanking out. I don't think it was William Jennings Bryant. It was somebody else. It was like a famous lawyer from that time. Who's the guy that did the Scopes monkey trial? Blanking out. Maybe Google it.
It was William Jennings Bryan. I don't remember the other.
Was
guy
William Jennings Bryant? William
He's
Jennings
part
Bryant
of-
was on he was like the anti-evolution side, right?
I think so.
It's Clarence Darrow. Okay, Clarence Darrow is the guy that defended him. And he essentially said they're not responsible for their actions, society is. Society produced these two people, and no rational person of carrying your empathy would ever do something like that. It must be this privileged, warped, this privileged background, this warped society that they were raised in, which caused them to do this. And they end up avoiding the death penalty and getting long prison sentences. One of the guys actually got out.
They called it affluenza.
Affluenza. Yeah, there's a guy right now that they are using that term about. So the idea that society is responsible. And you think about there's no personal responsibility in determinism. Let's maybe move into there's the let me back up for a minute. This idea of cause and effect, the argument from physics, and then we'll get back to the determinism thing. Because we've sort of gone afield to the argument from physics is, again, we live in this world of cause and effect, and human beings are not outside the world of cause and effect. We're part of it. We have material bodies. So, but you might say the body is material, but the soul isn't. So the idea of the soul or the mind is where decisions are made, and that's free. So even though your body is determined, the soul is free. And this is like something Descartes might say, right? You're an embodied soul, and where you make your decisions. You make your decisions in your mind, your soul, which is different from your body, different from your brain, and not subject to the laws of cause and effect. So that might be one way you could go. Another way you could go is you might say that maybe matter's not determined. But matter determined. That matter doesn't behave according to these deterministic laws. If you look at modern physics, it says that it's a matter of probability. And this goes back to this argument based on Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty. Let's put Heisenberg in down here. So Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty is the same physics. It says in the basic structure of the atom, you can't make predictions about how fast an electron is going and where it's at. So if you can tell where it's at, you don't know how fast it's going. If you know how fast it's going, you can't determine its position. You can't tell where it's at. So there's what's called the Copenhagen interpretation of Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty, which says that the reason you can't figure it out is because it's random. Essentially, there's this randomness in the very structure of matter. So if it's random and unpredictable, then it seems like that might make room for free will. You going way back to the first atomist, Democritus. Democritus said that you make all your decisions in your brain, and he actually knew that the brain was the seat of consciousness, or believed it, and had some good reasons for believing that. And it took a while for people to come back to that. But he said, every once in a while, one of the atoms in your brain swerves for no apparent reason, because matter is just sort of unruly stuff, and it doesn't, although generally it obeys these deterministic laws, occasionally stuff happens that you can't account for. And that's that element of randomness. And he thought that made room for free will. Every once in a while, an atom zigs when it should have zagged, and that explains why people do things out of character, why people make split-second decisions one way as opposed to another way, why things don't quite turn out how you think they will, why people have unpredictable behavior. So what do you think about these as a rebuttal to this argument for physics? So one says we're not purely material beings, so maybe the body's material, but the soul isn't. So we're not. Maybe I'll put this in, like in the test, I might have something like we aren't material beings. I need a thinner line here. We're not material beings. We're not purely material beings. We have this spiritual component, and that's where decisions are made. So that's one our objection. And the other one says that, okay, even if we are material beings, matter doesn't obey these deterministic laws. Modern physics says it's more iffy. Karl Popper has this thing where he says, matter doesn't behave like clocks, it behaves like clouds, right? You can't really predict the weather with any certainty. You only have you have degrees of probability. So if you're trying to figure out what's going to happen, tonight or tomorrow, pretty good. You get the 10 days out in the forecast, and it starts to get really iffy. And it's the same thing with matter. It's just sort of the probabilities there. There's certain things that you maybe be fairly accurate about predicting, but lots of other things that get more iffy. Any thoughts of either of these two arguments? Cover these. And move on to the behaviors thing then, because that's kind of what we've been talking about. And probably the example of like the delinquent and the serial killer are probably more, they probably fit better in with the behaviorist argument. But anything you think about that there's sort of two tacks. One is to say, well, it all boils down to your brain and neurophysiology and the laws of physics. And then the other tack that says it's all behavior. And so don't think about like how the decision is made, you just look at inputs and outputs. So here's the environment, so nature and nurture. So this is an argument about nature. Now we're looking at the argument about nurture or about environment as opposed to what's going on inside your brain, which might be inherited or there might be some environmental factors, I suppose. But generally speaking, I think we're looking at the argument from physics focuses on human nature, and the argument from the behaviorist argument focuses on environment. So B.F. Skinner wrote this book called Beyond Freedom and Dignity, did lots of writing and experiments, mostly with animals, with mice and pigeons. And Skinner says, look, if you look at behavior is conditioned, right? So we're conditioned as human beings to seek pleasure and avoid pain, and depending on our environment, we'll have different strategies for trying to do that. And you're determined by your environment, the habits you form about how you try to get pain and get pleasure and avoid pain. How you do that, it's just determined by your environment. So if you're like again raised by parents that say take you to the store and like hide things inside the stroller to try to shoplift, or they're doing drugs in the house, and maybe nobody's working in the house, right? That's going to present a certain way of life to you, and you're going to habituate yourself to that. As opposed to, like, say, another situation where both your parents are working, or one's working, the other one's staying home and taking care of you. Maybe you see your mom or dad be given too much change, and they don't realize it until they get into the car and they go back and return the money, right? So you get a whole different way of looking at things. And you become habituated to those things. You have a tendency to want to please your parents. You have all these natural proclivities, but your environment's going to determine how they play out. So let's see. Behaviorist arguments is the second argument. We act as we have been conditioned to act. So what do you think about this as an argument? Right, this is basic psychology, right? Conditioned response. You're looking at your psychology book. Does it have a thing? Well, okay. Ordinarily, the conditioned responses act this way, but occasionally someone makes a free will choice, and we just have to ignore all this stuff. No, psychologists will say conditions a response to environment. That's the way the human mind works. It's not like there are all these exceptions, which are the free will choices people make. People act according to the things they've been conditioned to do. It's like Pavlov's dog, right? You ring the bell and bring it food. You ring the bell, you bring food. You ring the bell and bring food. You ring the bell, and all of a sudden the dog's salivating, waiting for the food to come. And it's like everything like that, like you, I don't know, you're a kid and you see something bright and shiny and you want it, you're in the store, and you reach out for it, and maybe your parent takes your hand and says no, and like gives you a big frowny face. You don't like the frowny face, you crave approval, and so you associate that with pain, and so maybe you might, but you really like the brightly colored thing, and it looks really interesting and fun, and you reach out for it again, and maybe this time, ouch, it'll slap the hand down. And maybe you cry, right? And then next time you see that like brightly colored thing in the store, you think about putting your hand up and you're like, oh, the last time I tried to grab something in the store, it got slapped down. Maybe I shouldn't do that, right? So you have an aversion to it now. And maybe you get a complex about like brightly colored objects, or maybe next time they take you to the store, you cry before they even get you in the door because you remember being slapped, having your hand slapped. And maybe you have fear of supermarkets. Like lots of things can happen, right? And it's matching up pleasure and pain. Sometimes it's accidental. That's why people get phobias about things. So how could you ever like get beyond your conditioning? Any thoughts of that?
Change environments.
Yeah, I suppose you change your environment and
So reconditioning?
yeah, so this is what Skinner says, that what we need to do is recognize that human beings are behave according to their environment. So what we need to do is have social engineers create environments that create functional as opposed to dysfunctional behavior. So there's no freedom and dignity. There's no right and wrong. There's just functional and dysfunctional. So what you want to do is create rewards and punishments that make people want to obey the law, make them want to treat others with, I say respect, but not steal stuff and break things, not put their stupid little squiggle on the bathroom stall, right? Or on or whatever, right? Or in the nice on the nice clean white wall, or not shoot up Coke and rob the 7-Eleven store, or beat their kids, or commit whatever crimes, right? We want people to work hard, to be productive members of society, to have fulfilling relationships, to be happy and healthy. And so the idea is that you just need to have the right conditioning program. This is like that Cass Sunstein guy again I was talking about. He has this idea that you just sort of have these little nudges where you nudge people in the right direction. A little tax for this thing that you don't want people to do, a little subsidy for this thing you want people to do. And if you set it up that way, right, it's like, I don't know, like, let's think about the way things are now. Like, you think, oh, I'm so hungry, what will I buy? What will I have to eat? And you see the French fries, which look really delicious, and they're $1.25. You're like, oh, I could just like eat French fries for lunch, and it'd be $1.25, and the ketchup is free, right? And then it's like, or I could get a salad for like $5. And I'm like, oh, or I could get some like organic, wrap for $6. And it has an effect on your decision, right? Maybe you want to eat healthy, but maybe you're poor and you want to save your money too. You end up going with the French fries. And so like I think Skinner would say, create a society where the French fries are $10 and the salad is $1. And then you're going to have people making healthier choices. And don't expect a person to go against nature and say, oh, I'm going to have the salad instead of the French fries, and because the French fries are more delicious, and you have all these natural proclivities towards eating like fattening foods and salty foods and sweet foods. So you engineer things where you're rewarding person extra for doing the healthy thing, and just add multiply that stuff times a million. You subsidize the solar panels and recycling and all this stuff, right? So it's like the recycling, right? So if recycling was just doing it because it's the right thing to do, you probably wouldn't get a lot of compliance. You might get some, but it's like that 5 cents a container. It adds up, and homeless people collect them, and people don't want to throw away the money, and so they like save them and go to the machines and feed them in one at a time. Kind of a stupid way of doing things, but why do people do that? Why do people spend hours of their time feeding these things? It's because they don't want to lose money. And so you engineer the perfect society where people recycle, people don't commit crimes, people respect the property of others by conditioning people to act in the right way. And right not meaning like absolute right and wrong, but just functional versus dysfunctional. So thoughts on Skinner, what do you think? Is it all stimulus response? I'll put this up there, social engineering. Is that what we should be doing? I'm gonna throw one more thing on there, like Mayor Bloomberg, right? So he might be running for president. Make things more interesting. Mayor Bloomberg had a tax on, not a tax, there wasn't even a tax. He banned 32-ounce sodas. He said, if you want to get a soda with sugar in it, I don't even know if he like, I don't think this applies to diet ones. But for soda, you couldn't get any more than 16 ounces. Now, why would a person pass a law like that? Well, sugar is bad for you, and drinking your calories is bad for you. And the high fructose corn syrup is bad for you, but just plain sugar is bad for you too. But the soda is filled with high fructose corn syrup. And like a 32-ounce soda itself probably has like, I don't know, 300 or 400 calories, just drinking it down, right? You could have like a nice meal for that much. And so people are getting obese, they're adding to the healthcare rolls and costing the city money, and people are unhealthy. So Bloomberg says, well, to make people healthier, to make them weigh less, we're gonna save them from themselves, and I'm not gonna even put a tax on, I'm just saying no, 16 ounces is as big as you get. So you don't become big as a house. And so he passed that, and you know, people, now some people that are diehard soda fans, they'll go and they'll buy 2 16-ounce sodas, right? But most people are like, oh, they just get the biggest size available. And, you know, you have the effect of people drinking less soda, people weighing less, and people having less diabetes and all the complications from extra calories and extra weight. Seems like a good result. What do you think? And it's based on these deterministic principles. You guys are kind of quiet today. No thoughts on the government, the engineering your behavior for your own good? $5
They
tax
kind
on
of already
cigarettes?
are. So it's like they might as well do it for the good, because like you said, you can get around it and buy 2 sodas if you really die-hard soda fan, but just a little inconvenience of not having 1 container will switch your decision.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on how much you love your soda. Yeah.
I think with like food and drinks, it's okay for the government to like step in, but because sometimes like American society doesn't know like what's like really bad for them. Like obviously like 32 ounces of soda isn't good, so I think it's a good idea. But if it's like other realms of society, like I don't know, other areas like outside of food, it's a little dicier.
Dicier?
Yeah.
Like, I think of other things. Like, you know, promiscuous sex. I mean, you could have in some countries they have like a religious police that make sure people don't have promiscuous sex, and then they stone people to death and stuff. Or they whip them publicly, right? You know, people have promiscuous sex, they spread disease, there's unwanted pregnancies, you can solve a lot of problems that way. Oh, that's going too far, right? But then the question is like, where's the point? But the idea is that all we're doing is we're trying to get a good result. We're trying to get people to behave in ways that's going to benefit them and make them more healthy. Now the libertarian's going to say, this is kind of, you know, I get to make my choice, and if I want a 32-ounce soda, then I should be able to get a 32-ounce soda. And I think what the libertarian will say about the behaviorist argument here is mention this, libertarian, is And the environment can affect or predispose people to act in certain ways. But not determine them to. And this is the idea is influence. But influence isn't determination. Does it influence me, if I'm a smoker, that there's like a $5 pack tax or whatever it is? Or does it influence me that I have to get two smaller cups instead of one big cup? Well, yeah. Does it influence me that healthy organic food is more expensive than fast food? Well, yeah. Does it influence me that oil is cheaper than solar power? Sure. All those things add up. So, but it doesn't mean that I'm caused to act in those ways. It just kind of pushes me in that direction. But I can always push back if I want to. So I can make a free choice. So these are things that government and social engineer use to sort of make it a little harder for you to do what you want and make it easier for you to do things that you want them to do. But that doesn't mean you don't have a choice at all. It just means it's sort of an insidious way of trying to undermine your capacity for free choice and kind of coerce, or not, coercion is probably the wrong word, to influence you, to persuade you to act in a certain way. Yeah.
So like, if you can't rely on people to make their own decisions, make good decisions, how can you rely on the government, which is made up of people, to enforce laws, to make us do what they determine is right?
That is an excellent point, and that's sort of like I suppose more of a political point than a point about determinism. But yeah, it's Frederick Bastiat has this thing. He says, this idea that you can't trust human nature because human beings are bad and selfish and greedy. But then he says, but what if the legislatures, are they made of a different stuff than your average Joe? Are they the people, the politicians they're just as, if you think human nature is greedy, corrupt, selfish, and abusive, then why would you want to take a human being like that and give him power over others? That seems like a bad idea. But as far as like the kind of the case for social engineering, you could say, well, all you're really doing is you're changing behavior of people overall. But when it comes to any individual's choice, they still have a free choice. It's just that the deck's kind of stacked against them, and they're being influenced, they're being persuaded or even coerced, but they still have a free choice. So it doesn't show there's no free will. It just sort of assumes there's no free will, and so therefore there's nothing wrong with social engineering, which I think the libertarian will disagree with. Okay, let's take our 10-minute break and talk about the psychoanalytic argument. But not determine, does not turn them. Sorry.
Carrots.
It's just influence, it's not determination. Okay, let's talk about two things that are really important to most people: politics and religion, and even people that aren't particularly religious. They're maybe it's important to them because they want to avoid religious people telling them how to live their lives, right? So these are things that typically you think you pick, right? You pick your religion, you pick and you pick your political beliefs. Those are things that are under your free will choice. But if you look at this, you look at a map of the world. So here's the world's religions. This one's a little more particular. I like this one because it kind of gives you more of the broad brush. So interesting thing here, you look at places where Christianity is a dominant religion, right? So you look at Western Europe, right? Largely Christian, although it's changing with immigration from North Africa. But you look at the purple is Christianity. So Western Europe, where Christianity sort of flowered after the Roman Empire fell apart. It was transplanted from Israel and Palestine into over into Western Europe. It was spread through the Roman Empire, got sort of out here into Eastern Europe, and then and so you have Christianity here, and then of course colonists from primarily from England came over to the U.S. And then later on, you had waves of immigrants from Western and Eastern Europe, also Christians. You have the Spaniards coming down to South America and colonizing it and taking it over. So lo and behold, the whole mass of North America is mostly Christians. And what's that?
What a shock.
Yeah, it's surprising, right? And then also you had colonization of Africa by the British Empire and also by other European countries, mostly Britain, I think, down here in sub-Saharan Africa. And surprise, surprise, lots of Christians down there. You look at Islam that started from Saudi Arabia. Oops. Stupid mouse. Arr. I think people leave this out of the cradle. I don't have my key with me either. Oh, there we go. It's unstuck. So it started out from, let's see if I make this bigger. Started out from Saudi Arabia and moved over into Turkey and the satellite republics of the former Soviet Union. Right, I'll use this. And then moved over into North Africa and spread there, and that's pretty much where it stopped. So, and then came over to Europe, got into Europe, and then got beaten back. So this is pretty much where, and then also down into Indonesia, which is actually the most populous of Islamic countries. So all this is a result of wars of conquest and migration patterns, right? You had Buddhism started. First of all, look at India, the continent of India, where Hinduism started, right? That's the orange. Wow, look, it's all Hindu through and through. There's a few Muslims down there, and then this is the orange is.
What's the difference between the stripe?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think the yellow is Buddhism.
It's both of them.
It's Buddhism and Hinduism, right? So you see in India and in Southeast Asia, it's Buddhism and Hinduism. Now, here's a question. Why aren't there big orange stripes going through here? Here you get some, this is the folk religions, I think. So this is like indigenous stuff from the Inuit or something up way far north here. But why is this almost pretty much purple through and through? And why is this all orange and orange and yellow stripe? Why Hinduism in India and Hinduism and Buddhism in Southeast Asia? And why is Japan almost all Buddhist? And why is it that the Middle East is all Islamic? Is it people making free will decisions about what religion they're going to believe in? No, it's the culture. It's the influence of culture. And people that have a religion in these areas, they tend to pick the religion dominant in the culture. And especially when you get in culturally homogeneous places where you don't have a lot of outside communication with the outside world in developing countries, without internet, without everybody having a cell phone. You're even more isolated and more likely to pick up the cultural beliefs of everybody else, including your religion. So where's the free will choice? And this is a particular problem with Christianity when you say that everybody has a free will choice to accept or reject Jesus to determine their eternal destiny. And you look at some schmo over in like rural China who has some missionary tell him the gospel of Jesus, and he's like, oh, that's some weird foreign religion. I'm worshiping the ancestors. That's what my deal is. Is that really a free will choice? So, thoughts of this? Doesn't this throw a monkey wrench in this idea that if you can't pick your religion, your politics, what are you left with? You're picking what color socks you're going to wear today. And the religion and culture goes with a lot of other beliefs too, like how many wives you can have and whether homosexuality is okay, all those things. Yeah.
I think it's constructive. It's like, so like society tells us how much we need to about ourselves. And like, I mean, you're making a joke about it, like this, what kind of socks we're wearing. Yeah, like day-to-day stuff. I mean, really, that's all we kind of, I mean, you can vote for your representative elected, like he can represent you in government. That's about it. Like day-to-day stuff and I guess voting if you're in the correct country. So, I don't know. It seems like, how do I phrase this? It seems like we have the ability to choose our religion and choose our beliefs, but society kind of indicates that we should choose a certain one.
Mm-hmm. So you're making the argument that culture and society kind of push us in one direction, but maybe certain strong individuals can throw off the shackles of conformity and make a free choice.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, yeah. I don't know if it's strong individuals, but rather just people that are determined to lead a certain set of ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like, I kind of just walked in randomly, but I feel like
Go ahead.
parents have more control over religion. I don't know, like, sorry, I feel like I'm kind of lost.
No, that's all right.
Crap in there, but from what I heard, personally, I feel like not as much culture and society, maybe, I guess, but like, I feel like parents and peers and family members have more of an influence, just because they're teaching you, and if they want to teach you their way, you're probably going to learn and grow up and think that way too, but, I mean, I don't know, never mind.
Well, no, you make a good point that people like who are raised in a religion, they see it as being normative. That's what their family believes. They're raised to be a Christian or a Buddhist or what have you, and that's.
My parents were atheists, so I grew up a non-atheist, but like, if it was culture or society that had raised me, I probably would have been Christian.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents influenced me. Am I making sense?
No, you are. Yeah, I have a friend like that. He was, his parents were from Eastern Europe, and they're atheists, and he was raised to think that believing in God is like he was told it was like Santa Claus for adults, and that and his parents said, well, usually you grow up and you realize there's not a Santa Claus, but some people just haven't figured it out yet, and that's what we call Christians. So I mean, and just like really, they're laid on pretty thick of like religion is this foolishness. It's what the government uses to control you, and it's for old women and ignoramuses, and not for like a thinking, intelligent person. So he sees that's his view of religion based on his early experiences with family. Yeah.
It's also not displayed as a choice in a lot of cultures. It's just a way of life, or if you don't believe this, we're going to kill you.
Yeah, that's true.
Situation.
There's some of that, particularly with Islam, which is a rather authoritarian religion, which is often melded with state control. And in the Middle Ages, you had that certainly with Christianity being imposed on people, and including conquered territories. And contrary to the teachings of Jesus, I might add. But you have, so there's that, but there's also like even in these areas where you have the religious police and you have this sort of authoritarian control and religion being forced on people and forced conversion, and if you leave the religion you'll be killed. There's still, even in those societies, I think the majority of people, they're going along with it because they really believe it's true, not because they're being forced to believe it. And then, again, you ask the question, like, if it's all free will, if everybody's making these free will choices every day, why is it that religions tend to cluster in these areas? Like Islam, North Africa and the Middle East, Christianity, Western Europe, the United States, Hinduism, India, Buddhism, Southeast Asia, right, and Japan. And these are all represent, like, Buddhism migrated out of India and took a root in Asia, and that's where it sort of flowered and took off. And so that's, and Australia, right, it's a colony, originally a colony of Britain. So it's, and then the I'm not sure what this no religion thing is here.
I'm pretty sure that's the desert.
Is it nobody lives there, right?
Only on the very edges of the continent.
Yeah. Same thing with up here, like up in the big swatch of the Soviet Union, I have lots of people living. Yeah, so there's religion, and it makes you think, well, how much choice do I really have over my religion? And there's studies that show, like, the parents' religion and the kids' religion, and there's like a lot, not always, but a great amount of the time, 60, 70, 80% of the time, the kids follow in the footsteps of the parents as far as what their religion is. Less so in the United States and in some other places. So here's a thing on politics. Here's a study. If this is from the Smithsonian, and they're looking at people's brains and trying to figure out trying to predict their political beliefs. If you want to know people's politics, study their parents. In fact, party affiliation of someone's parents can predict the child's political leanings about 70% of the time. About around 70% of the time. Looks like there's a typo in this article. How embarrassing for the Smithsonian. Sometimes the standards of websites is just a little below the print edition. But new research published yesterday suggests what mom and dad think isn't the end game in shaping a political identity, that these differences reflect distinct neural processes, and they can predict who's left of center or right of center with 82.9% accuracy, outperforming your parents. So if we know what your parents' political beliefs are, we can predict your political beliefs 70% of the time. But if we do a scan of your brain, we can predict it 82.9% of the time. So again, where's the free will decision, right? It turns out, according to this article, that it's a product of your neurophysiology. So it's kind of, and the idea that your beliefs, whether you're like a Republican or Democrat or independent, it has to do with I'll just give you some details here. It has to do with your fear processing in the amygdala. So here's what it says. Liberals tend to seek out novelty and uncertainty, while conservatives exhibit strong changes in attitude to threatening situations. Liberals are more willing to accept risk, while conservatives have intense physical reactions to threatening stimuli. I'm not sure about that. If you went to Vegas, you won't be able to tell if it's a Democrat or Republican. But the fact that being a Republican changes how your brain processes risk and gambling is really fascinating, says one of the researchers. So anyway, this is just scientists who are getting pretty good at figuring out like why people support certain parties, have certain political beliefs, and it looks like some of this might be hardwired in your brain. So again, like here's one thing that says it's the influence of your parents, and you can so there's culture, there's your parents, and then there's like your brain, like what you inherit from your parents. So again, any thoughts of free will choice? Yeah.
I just kind of think it sucks that you grow up in an environment where your parents like kind of dictate what you believe in, and not saying that they do, but you kind of take what, because you look up to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think that sucks because I kind of grew up, my parents are Democrats, but they taught me like the Republican views, and they taught me other religions just so that I can choose, because they don't want me to be influenced by them.
Yeah.
Because there's such a big world out there, and they want me to make my own decision. And I think that just kind of sucks that we're so influenced by them, and we're not like taught like about everything else. We're kind of closed-minded to our culture and what our parents believe.
And people tend to go along with the group. That's like part of like the herd mentality. And I suppose I think one of the ideas of education is try to get people out of that mood of thinking. So does this mean necessarily that we're a product of our conditioning? I think you can still talk about influence. So you can say, well, it's still, we're talking about 70, 80%. But then maybe that shows that you still have choice, and maybe this just shows people are lazy, and that people like to be spoon-fed beliefs, or people don't think critically and independently. And maybe the 20 to 30% do, and maybe those are the people that actually form their beliefs through free will, rational choice, and other people just kind of go with the flow, because human beings tend to be kind of lazy and go with what everybody else thinks. Yeah.
Well, I think it's like the same as like nature versus nurture argument. It's a little bit of both. I think it's like either or. You're a product of your environment and like yourself, but also things influence you. So I think it's like both. There's not either one.
Yeah. So questions: why do religions cluster in geographic regions? I'll just put in regions. And then you have parents or brain scans. Predict political beliefs. And maybe we could talk about, maybe it's still people are lazy and sheep-like. But some let's see. But maybe capable of free choice. So maybe what we need is like more education. So in other words, there's this fact about human nature that people tend to go along with the group. They tend to be influenced by their peers. When something new comes up, you kind of look around and say, well, what's everybody else doing? And you want to look like other people, and you want to fit in. And if you're worried about doing things right, you're worried about people judging you. And that's sort of this herd mentality that human beings have. And thinking critically and independently is like really hard work. But maybe more people could think critically, make informed, free, rational choices. If, I might say, educated, exposed, too many different points of view. And maybe that's the case, that it seems that in order to make a free will choice, you have to be exposed to a lot of different kinds of information and then make a choice. So maybe if we did that, that would allow people to make free choices. That's one of the goals of education, right? You expose people to a lot of different ideas, and then they can make an informed choice. And maybe that's really what free will is you're exposed to, say, different cultures, different religions, different ways of doing things, and then you can compare and contrast and say, well, I think this is best, or I think this one's best. Yeah.
But isn't kind of the education system like a byproduct of the environment or like the town or like area that it's in? Because I grew up in a really Republican town, and like the way I was taught like history and religion, even health, like when we got taught sex ed, we did not learn about like protecting yourself and contraception because they didn't believe in it. It was just like, don't have sex till you're married.
Wow.
And that was it was a public school, like,
Uh-huh.
and it's such a byproduct of that area. And I think that's kind of how all education systems are, even if it's a public school.
Yeah, in general, like the government schools could give you the government line.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, like, I was in government schools quite some time ago, but I remember it's like I was in California, Sacramento, the state capital. Everybody and their brother works for the government, and it was like heavily biased towards Democrats. You know, Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was seen as like the second coming. He was like revered as a god. Johnson's Great Society programs were seen as you know the best thing next to sliced bread. And so there's that bias, and then you think about, well, who's like doing the teaching? Well, it's a bunch of like unionized government workers, right? What kind of view do they have? Same thing with college professors. College professors are a bunch of commies. They're a bunch of socialist pinko commies. Yeah, the present company accepted. Why is that? Well, they're a bunch of like elitist, unionized government workers, and that there's all this sort of cultural thing, and this speaks to your point. Why does somebody go into teaching? They want to change the world. They want to, you know, and there's all these sort of social values. And you look at the number of college professors that, you know, have, I don't know, religious affiliation, it's like really small. And you look at the party, they've done all these studies on party registration. And especially in the social sciences, it's, you know, you look at sociology and, what's the other one? Psychology and political science, or sociology and anthropology. You're looking at like 80% of the people are like registered Democrat, or there's some third party, they're like Green, or they're, you know, Communist Party USA, or Peace and Freedom, or something like that. So like really like on the far radical left. And you look on their issues, all the social issues and the economic issues, and they're like, you compare them to the rest of the country, they're like way over on one side. And so this is why when people go to college, they tend to come out with more, you know, liberal or progressive views. But you know, growing up, can I ask where you grew up, like that went to school?
In Alaska.
Alaska, okay, yeah, so it tends to be more Republican. And same thing if you grew up like in Texas, you know, like certain parts of Texas or Orange County, you'd have like a certain line on things, or like rural Georgia or something like that. Whereas if you grew up in New York City, you'd be putting the condom on the banana and, you know, all the whole thing, and you'd be reading Heather Has Two Mommies and the whole opposite thing. So then the thing is like, where's the objective view? Because you're going to be molded by those early experiences. Let's see, it was a comment or question? Yeah.
So I find it kind of interesting, because you said that people come to university and lead a little bit more liberal, and just out of personal experience, people that are in my political science classes, like, they usually come in with a pretty like liberal mindset, and after 2 or 3 years of just having this very, very liberal agenda drilled into you, a lot of people switch. Like, a lot of people flip over to a conservative side. So I think that's just kind of an interesting phenomenon that happens when people are exposed to an extreme amount of what they believe. Like, they might
And you follow sort of, sometimes there's even a life cycle, like people, they tend to start out when they're young, more idealistic. They tend to be more liberal, and then they like get their first job and they see how much goes to taxes, and maybe they're part of some big organization. They see how like inefficient it is, particularly you get a job working for the government, and then you're like, oh, this is awful. And then as people, start amassing assets and trying to make their way in the world, they're like, oh, the government's not all it's cracked up to be, and so they tend to become more conservative. And then often when they get like near retirement age, they flip and become socialists again. So I don't know. It is kind of interesting though. But you think about then where's like the free will? Why is it that people again generally start out more liberal and become more conservative? And if these are like free will choices, what does that mean? Why should it be? Why should it be determined by how old you are? Like, okay, here's another example. Like, all these opinion polls. These opinion polls are really good at predicting what's going to happen in the next election, and they make these things based on your race, on your ethnicity, on your gender, on your age, and by looking at and maybe on like what part of the country you're from, and they can take this demographic data based on those factors about you, and figure out how you're going to vote. Now, for any given individual, it's not very accurate, but looking at like large groups of individuals, they're really good at it, and trying to figure out what who are people going to vote for. But it seems like you shouldn't be able to predict who's going to win the election if everybody's making a free choice, casting a vote based on a free will decision, right? If it's free will, it means you can't predict it. If it's free, it should be. There's nothing making it turn out that way, and so you shouldn't be able to look at at this data and predict what somebody's going to do. Like imagine I don't know, we're arguing about free will, and you say, I just know I have free will. I know I'm free, and I said, okay, I'm going to pull out the big guns and show you you're wrong. And you're like, and you say, okay, well, okay, prove me wrong, and then maybe you reach into your bag, and I say, you're pulling out breath mint, right? And you look, and that's exactly what you're doing. And you pull out the breath mint. I say, and now you're gonna you're gonna put it back because you're like, oh, I'm confirming Bardell's the thing, right? And suppose I say, I predict all the things you're going to do during the day. Now, if I tell you those, it's going to affect you. Imagine though maybe you get home and there's an envelope waiting for you in the mailbox, and it details all the things you've just done. And there's no way that letter, and the letter is sealed, right? Maybe it's even got a postmark from yesterday on it. And it tells you everything that's happened. So this letter was written before your entire day, and it tells you all the things you were going to do. It seems like then you think, okay, well, if every single thing I did that day is predicted, it can't really be free. And this actually gets to this theological determinism thing. Maybe I should hit that next. We have to talk about the psychoanalytic thing too. Let's just jump to the psychoanalytic thing. But it seems like I'll just put polls. Yeah, polls. Polls predict supposed, free choices at the ballot box. Based on demographic data. And I just think the libertarians' view on this is just going to say, well, again, you're dealing with big groups of people, you're dealing with influence and guesses based on what people tend to do, and you're dealing with influences, you're not dealing with determination. So that's kind of the line of the libertarian, is that that influence and predisposition doesn't mean necessity. It just means you're inclined to act a certain way, but it doesn't mean that you have to act that way or behave that way. Psychoanalytic argument. Psychoanalytic. For determinism. So this comes from Freud, Sigmund Freud, who really the first person to really develop a theory of the unconscious mind. So there's a part of your mind, the unconscious mind, that deals with a lot of your day-to-day things and holds these kind of enduring attitudes or beliefs about the world. And is unconscious. The unconscious is, or the subconscious. Either one will do. The unconscious mind is really what's calling the shots. And what's in your unconscious mind is a result of your experience. And particularly of early childhood experience, where you don't really have the ability to make free choices. So the idea Freud has, like around by the age of 5, your unconscious mind's pretty much fully developed. And so, and it's full of all kinds of stuff, often irrational, that drives your behavior. So a person comes into therapy and they say, suppose as a young woman, they say, "Doc, I don't know what's going on, but every relationship I have fails. I pick these lousy men and they end up drinking and cheating on me and then leaving me for another woman. And sometimes they beat me, and it happens over and over and over again. I used to think I was just cursed by being born under a bad sign, or that my stars weren't right, and and then I used to think it was just bad luck. But how can bad luck happen over and over and over again? I thought I was cursed. And then my friend said I ought to go see a shrink and see what's what. So here I am. Right? So what do you think the psychologist might say? What do you think might be the result of therapy? Maybe after, I don't know, a few months of sessions.
The guy's broke.
What's that? Oh, the woman's broke. Yeah, I suppose that's one result. Well, you know, like what, I don't know. You ever listen to those like call-in shows or whatever, or your pop psychology? But what would probably happen is you know the psychologist would say, well, let's look at your childhood. You know, tell me about your father. Oh, well, Dad was never around. He was a traveling salesman, and then he'd come home, and I just remember he'd like drink like crazy, and sometimes he'd fly into a rage and he'd beat us kids, and we'd hide in the closet, you know. And my older sister, who would protect us, she's like a nightclub singer, and she is really attractive, and she has these men that like buy her cars and jewelry and stuff, and seems to do really well. And my other sister, she's lives alone and has never been on a date ever, as far as I know. Maybe she's a lesbian. And me, I just have these bad relationships with men that beat and abuse me. And you know, psychologists might say, well, let me tell you about the unconscious mind. So if you have a parent who's supposed to be nurturing and loving and so on, and they're not there, and when they are there, they're violent, abusive, and unpredictable, your unconscious mind is this funny thing. It says, well, my father, who's supposed to love me and be there for me and is like a god to me, is this terrible tyrannical figure. And he never loved me. And so, but I really want my father to love me. So I'm going to find somebody just like my dad and get him to love me, and that's going to be good. That's going to be the same thing. So if I can find somebody just like my dad who will love me, then I will be loved by my father, and that will be great. Now, and the psychologist would say, now consciously you're totally unaware of this. But that's what's going on like deep down in your mind. And if we were to hypnotize you, all this stuff would probably come out. And that's like generally what happens. You have people with problematic relationships where they seem to seek out people who are abusive. And this tends to be like a women problem, a problem that women have, of seeking out violent and abusive partners. And it's because they had a violent or abusive or absent father, and so they look for a father figure. And this is like a known thing. So now the question is, do you really have a choice over who you date? Right? So if it's based on all this stuff in your unconscious mind that you have no clue what's going on there, and it happened when you're too young to even remember it. And the psychoanalytic argument is that that's not just true for like neurotic people with problem relationships. It's true about everything, and even the positive things, right? So why is somebody like a successful businessman, and why is he full of self-confidence? Why? And it might be that maybe there's some little league game, right? And it's it's the bottom of the 8th inning, and bases are loaded. And he's at bat, and the whole game relies on whether he's going to hit the ball or not. And maybe his dad's there, and his dad's the coach of the team, and he puts his hand on his shoulder and says, "You can do it, son. You can do anything," right? And he hits a home run, and he's like the hero for the day, right? And that's maybe sets the course for the rest of his life, because down rooted in his subconscious mind is you're a winner. You can do anything, right? And now, he might even forgot about that game. Maybe occasionally he remembers it, but that might be part of his unconscious mind. That's like every time he wakes up in the morning, or he has some challenging business deal or problem, it's like this little voice inside says, "You can do anything. Don't pay attention to these obstacles. You'll find some way out of it. You're a winner. You're always going to win." Right? So it could be positive things too. It's just that the neurotic things are easier to kind of pick up, because it's kind of neurotic behaviors, it shows it's a symptom that something's wrong, and you figure, well, why am I doing this irrational thing? Well, it's the unconscious mind. But there could be, there's positive things there too. So thoughts about this, about the influence of the unconscious. If the unconscious is calling the shots, where's your free will? Any thoughts?
They're all unconscious, so I can't.
They're all unconscious thoughts. So this is like you talk about there's neurotic behavior is one proof of the unconscious, and then there's hypnosis. Hypnosis is really interesting. You can actually feel your own subconscious mind at work. I don't know if I mentioned this before. You sort of, you can hypnotize yourself. Just sort of like sit in a chair and relax, and like put your hand out on the desk or on the armchair, and imagine a string tied to your finger, and a giant hot air balloon soaring up to the sky and pulling your finger skyward. And if you just picture that, first your finger will start to twitch a little bit, and then it'll move up, and depending on how suggestible you are, in maybe 5 or 10 minutes, your arm will start to move seemingly of its own accord. And that's your unconscious mind. And I'm making a demonstration here. Why aren't we showing me on the screen here? I'm looking at neurotic behavior and hypnosis. Anyway, you'll feel your arm it'll just like moving on its own. And it's different from like moving your arm up and down. All you're doing is picturing something in your mind. And if you picture it vividly enough, there goes your arm up in the air. Some people, it takes like 2 minutes and their arm goes like up like this. And those are the guys like the stage hypnotists make, walk like a chicken, or, bark like a dog and crawl around the ground and so on and so forth, right? So these are two proofs that the subconscious mind exists. So you have people doing things like the woman, right? And you probably know somebody like this, right? Somebody who has like a long string of broken relationships. And okay, now there's a chance, maybe you're like hanging out with some friends, and there's this guy who's like, I don't know, he's an engineering student, he's smart, he's funny, he's attractive, right? And he's he's got a thing for this girl, right? And who's she interested in? Well, it's like the gangbanger, that who's over there ignoring her. And she's like, oh, that guy, I really have the hots for him. This guy's he's kind of boring, right? And so there's this attraction to like the sort of the person, the social deviant, or the person with lots of problems that she's going to fix, right? So you think after like 3 or 4 times around the block with the guy that she's going to fix, with the substance abuse problems and the criminal behavior and the violent outbursts and so on, that she'd learn from experience. And that she'd say, okay, I'm going to stay away from guys like that and pick a guy who's more functional. But no, she keeps on going back to those bad boys. And the question is, why is that, right? Well, it's something she needs to work out in therapy. It's that thing in her subconscious that says, find someone like your alcoholic, abusive father to love you, and then your father will love you. And her father might be long dead and gone, or disappeared, right? But there's still that thing in the unconscious mind driving her behavior. And so it is with all our behavior, according to the Freudians. Now, one argument against this is that, well, maybe people are screwed up, like people with, busted up relationships and problems, people that like have hand washing compulsions and extreme phobias. Maybe they're not free, so maybe I'll just say you could have freedom in other areas, right? So maybe she doesn't have a choice about her relationships, but maybe she has freedom in regard to her career, right? Or all the other choices she makes. Maybe the guy with the hand washing compulsion doesn't have a choice about whether he's going to wash his hands 100 times a day, but maybe his dating life is just fine. He's fine, a woman will put up with his OCD, right? Or so it's the idea is that neurotic behavior and these subconscious things, they might muck up people's lives, and maybe they can affect them positively. And even though it influences our behavior, it doesn't mean that everything you do is a result of some childhood trauma or some maybe a positive thing too, right? I use the example in the text, why do I love Apple products? Well, maybe it's just because like the school subsidizes them, and I like the way the operating system works. It's just a practical choice that has nothing to do with childhood trauma or early experiences or my unconscious mind. I just make simple means-ends decisions. And maybe most of our decisions are like that. Okay, I think we're running out of time. We're going to finish up free will on Tuesday and then review for the exam.